Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are leading by example, fueling positive change and making a difference so we can learn and do the same.
We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose.
Now here's your host, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. On this episode, we're talking about ethical entrepreneurship, strategic leadership, and global impact. We're honored to have with us the CEO of Dignity Made, Erik Olson. Erik, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'm happy to be on the show.
Well, we have a lot to dive into. When you talk about global impact and entrepreneurship and leadership, obviously we'll unpack those, but let's start the fun of ChangeMakers as we get to know you personally. So give us a little background on where you grew up.
I grew up in rural Minnesota, outside of the Twin Cities, and my dad actually was a pastor. So I had a very different upbringing than a lot of other people, kind of forced to go to church unless I was puking my guts out. I had to be at church and often had to be at church at a lot of events I didn't want to be at. I can't tell you how many weddings I had to sit through because that's where dinner was, is how my parents said it. But it was a good upbringing, and I'm really grateful for it.
When you talk about growing up in the church, was that something, as you alluded to, like you grow up in it and you don't really understand necessarily the events, the experiences, the spirituality of it, but talk about kind of that side for you. Did you have any siblings? Like talk about it in terms of family and how you're able to kind of balance that a little bit with like other activities and sports and just the things you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it was what we did. This is what you have to do. I didn't have a choice. And so if you had asked me back then, I would have answered kind of like asking a fish, what's water like? Like, this is just what you do. You go to church on Sundays, you go on Wednesdays, you have to sing in the choir because my mom is the choir director. And like, did I want to sing? No, I wanted to be in Boy Scouts, but they met at the same time, so I couldn't do that. I did have a brother who's 4 years younger, and so I think we just kind of, because we didn't think we had a choice, we just went with it, and we would just hang out playing foosball in the lobby, as much as we could, or we'd go out, it was kind of there was like a woods in the back of the church, and we just go explore the woods and, go find things to climb. And so that's what life was like for us. But I think looking back, I am grateful for it because it really did connect me to a good community of people that had good morals, good character. I mean, not everybody, but most of the time. And it also instilled in me this desire to help others, to really think of others first. And I think that has a lot to do with where I am today.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, I think when you see your parents constantly giving and helping others unconditionally, especially through the church, like at some point you may kind of fight against it early on, but at some point it seeps back in and you start to realize, wait a second, wow, the power of this transformation and what I can do in the service of others is a through line that obviously will lead us to Dignity Made and everything you're doing. But give us a couple of other things. When you think about just growing up in Minnesota, like what was life like? What were some favorite traditions, some favorite things that you had a chance to do or even eat?
Well, coming from a Scandinavian Lutheran household, there were a lot of really interesting things that we just thought was normal. And as I moved out and moved to Chicago and then later California, I realized, holy cow, people don't do this. I mean, I realized really quickly, the name Erik alone is not a very common name. I mean, Erik is one of the most popular names in Minnesota. And Erik Olsons, I know 10 Erik Olsons. But in California, I was a wild card. Nobody, Erik Olson, that's a weird name. So we ate, we would eat a lot of very Scandinavian things that had, hornbachers and lutefisk and lefse, all these things that most people have no idea. Well, what the heck are you talking about? And so there is a lot of tradition, which is interesting when you're in it. and you're in this kind of bubble. You kind of think everybody's like this until you get out. And I'm sure many other people growing up in Dutch communities or other things can, kind of relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the fun of this, right? Is like you start realizing, okay, I've got my traditions, other people have theirs, and that's the fun is you get to learn a little bit, and everybody's a little crazy, and that's the fun part of it.
And we didn't have the internet back then or social media to see what other people are doing. We just lived with what we had. Unless you traveled, you didn't see it.
Give me one favorite memory growing up for you, and it can be, just an experience like a trip. It can be something, in school. But what's a favorite just memory from you growing up?
My family, we traveled a lot. We would go on road trips. And so I remember going to Yellowstone for the first time. And, from rural Minnesota, little pocket to traveling and just seeing these huge, big mountains, to seeing these big landscapes. I mean, we have beautiful outdoors in Minnesota, and it's surprising how outdoorsy people are for how terrible the weather is all year round. But Yellowstone is just absolutely gorgeous, and we don't have mountains here in Minnesota, so it was remarkable. I remember we wake up now, we tent when we go because our family is super frugal. And so I remember waking up to my tent to an elk 6 feet away from my face. But we did a lot of family trips where we'd drive to the Tetons. We drove to Colorado. We went East Coast. We went to Washington, D.C. I remember, I think by the time I was 12, I had visited 38 states and had spent time in each one, or at least had driven through it. That was really helpful. And that I think that gave me this sense of adventure of like, hey, it's fun to kind of see a new place and meet people from different places that later led to going to places all around the world. To now where I think I'm at 38 countries.
When you look at the entrepreneurship side, where does that start to begin? Was that something through school? When kind of carry that into the entrepreneurship and that thread for you when you started to kind of see that start to come about?
Interesting enough, it was because my dad, I had told him I had a heart to serve and I wanted to do some kind of ministry to help others. And he said to me, he said, Eric, one of the biggest problems that pastors have is they have no organizational skills. And so he said to me, Eric, go get a business degree and then go get your doctorate of divinity and things like that, because your undergraduate doesn't actually matter which one you get. So you might as well figure out how to organize people and lead them. And so I did that. And then that led to, I got an internship with College Works Painting. You might be familiar with like Student Works Painting, College Works Painting, or Student Painters Pro. It's basically where they let a college student take a zip code of their business and let them run it. Everything from sales to hiring to firing to running payroll and all of it. And my freshman year, I did that. And I was the top producing salesman for the company that year. And I realized, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. And so I did it in the following year, and I did it again the next year. And that's how I paid for my college experience.
So when you look at that sort of leadership and organizational skills, obviously, coming out, what was your first transition out of college?
Well, I still had this heart to serve. And actually through my years of college, I kind of lost that heart to kind of be a pastor. I started saying, I don't know if that's for me, because this business side really took over. And I started thinking, imagining what kind of business could I create, or, climbing the corporate ladder, some of those things. And I don't think it was, just like a greedy thing. It was, I wanted to build something, and that was exciting. And so I had a lot of ideas and a lot of offers of things to do. And I quickly realized, if I'm going to go out and start something, I need to be ready to spend the next 10 years really building either that career or that new business. And that side of the servant side of me said, hold on, maybe I should take a gap year and go serve before I get those golden handcuffs, or I'm stuck in a business that I'm trying to create before I can exit. And so I did. I kind of made this commitment. All right, God, I'm going to take the first year out of college and I'm going to go serve the poor. And it's a much longer story. We probably don't have time for it today, but I ended up in Iraq right after 2003, Iraqi freedom. I landed with 8 other people who, we didn't really know what we were doing. And we had some qualifications to help the people. But
Did you choose to go there, or were you chosen to go there and you didn't know that that's where you were going?
I chose to go there, but it was because I had dozens of other doors that I wanted to go through kind of shut in my face. I had, there's, an opportunity to go to Bolivia, and I had just missed the application process. I got turned down from going to another place. I'd figured Latin America made the most sense. I spoke Spanish, and I heard of people going to Latin America, and they come back like really fluent. And I'm like, oh, that would be great on my resume, helpful for life. And so I tried to get into Peru, and they said no. And I'm thinking, have you seen my GPA and my resume? I'm like, what are you? And so all these doors shut in my face, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, how, like, there's so many poor people in the world. How can I not find a place to go help? It was really discouraging and actually humiliating. So I end up couch surfing after graduating college, and end up on a friend's couch in the middle of Arizona. And I happened to meet up with an old friend of mine, and the first words out of his mouth was, Erik, I've been thinking about you. I think you're supposed to go to Iraq and help the people. And I'm like, Neil, that is the furthest from my thought. And my parents would probably kill me before they let me do that. But I met with them and talked with them, and he just kind of started telling me more about like just other parts of the world I had not considered, and the level of poverty that I was really unaware of. At that point, I'd been to Mexico to build a house once or twice. I'd served at soup kitchens, but I had never really experienced extreme poverty like he had described. And he started telling me how most people aren't willing to go to some of these really hard places, these dark places where people are really suffering. And I realized, oh, I have this sense of adventure, travel, and like, I'm not scared of that. And so I jumped in and spent a year in the middle of a war zone. And it was one of the best years of my life.
There's a whole podcast we could probably do on that 1 year of your life, but give me a little bit of an executive summary version around what you were able to experience. Because I've got to imagine, obviously, going in, scary place, especially because of the news, but probably amazing people and probably life-changing in terms of, wait a second, all of the stereotypes, all of those types of things versus, wait a second, when you meet the people and you see the need and you see the poverty, but yet I can be a catalyst for good. What was that like? What were some of the experiences like? In other words, how did it change you?
Yeah. So we were there to help with water sanitation. People were getting sick like crazy from the water. And we had some experienced water engineers that were going to help with that. And we had other projects that we were doing, kind of medical, dental, the kind of typical nonprofit kind of thing. And the city we were going into was 40% Kurdish, which they were just really exploited and taken advantage of during Saddam's time. So they were like, hey, the liberators, you're American, like, we love you. And then there were the Shias, that was the other 40% of our city. And they were pretty happy too, because they were marginalized. The Sunnis were the ones that were in charge. They were the ones given all the power and everything. So in a lot of ways, people were really warm and receptive, and they were excited. And it was also, Saddam had just fallen just a few weeks ago, the big statue, you might remember that video. And so everybody's thinking, this is a whole new world. This is a new chapter. Like, the possibilities are endless. People started dreaming again of what could we do, and what could this country look like? So there was this new energy that was there, and there's a lot of excitement, and they saw us as a way to partner together and help make that happen. So we were really well received. At the same time, their life was like so different than how we saw it. Many of the things that they did really felt backwards and primitive. And yet there was also this warmth and love that really actually kind of threw my faith for a bit, because they showed me a level of hospitality that I never experienced growing up in the church, and which was surprising and humbling, and also yeah, it felt really comforting. Since I just left home, I felt like I'd found a new family that really cared about me and loved me.
So where does the Philippines enter the equation, tied obviously to Dignity Made? So let's start to transition into Dignity Made. Give us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, so my father-in-law and I, we had been working around the world doing a lot of different nonprofit work, and so we had helped stop trafficking with women that had been trafficked to Greece, to Honduras, to Thailand, other areas. We had been doing work with just extreme poverty. So we'd been working a lot of different places, helping set up teams, launching teams into places, helping them be effective. And one of the places that was special on our hearts was the Philippines. And so together with this other founder, Don Biker, we had built an orphanage, we had built a high school and a technical school, and even a reverse osmosis water filtration system. And a lot of that was going really well. But we kind of hit this glass ceiling with this community in the Philippines, and we weren't sure what was going on. So to kind of paint a picture for these coconut farmers in the Philippines, I'll tell you about like the Tamog family. Tamog family is kind of a typical family that lives in the Philippines. They are living in extreme poverty. They can only afford a limited diet of rice, okra, yams. Kids are malnourished, sick from the water. They don't have money for doctors, medicine. Half the time the kids went to school, they had diarrhea, and the kids, they would drop out of school to provide for their family. They were living basically one harvest from just starvation. And so oftentimes what happens with farmers and there's about 3.5 million coconut farmers in the Philippines that live in this kind of situation. So they're in a bad spot, and here's what often happens. Well, I'll tell you the story how we figured this out. So the husband named Romer, we were doing a survey with the different farmers, asking different questions, trying to figure out what else are we not seeing here. And at the end, we walked out and we said, "Hey, Romer, what's the biggest hope and dream for your life?" And we thought he would talk about building a cinder block home, because he had like this bamboo hut that every time a typhoon came, it got knocked over and he'd have to build it back up. But he didn't say that. We thought he'd talk about education for his kids, because they had dropped out of school and only 35% of the kids graduate high school. And that's a big deal if you can graduate high school. We thought he'd talk about education for his kids, but instead he looked at us and said, "My biggest hope in life is that my debt is not passed on to my children." And that's when we realized there was this whole ugly side of the coconut industry that we had missed and didn't realize. And so there was this economic problem that needed an economic solution. So we we realized if we're going to really help this community out of these terrible situations, we've got to get into the economics of it. And so we built a business that could buy the coconuts from the farmers at a fair price, and then employ people at the factory on top of the community development work that we're doing. So it's kind of like a business with the heart of a nonprofit.
Touch on a little bit more, in other words, dive in deeper, because for those who aren't familiar with obviously how it works in the economic side of this, for the farmers, is buying the coconuts, is that freeing for them financially, or is there more to the story in terms of how they're kind of indentured to a landowner to then buy it? So in other words, kind of walk that back a little bit for what you're able to see, so that you're able to really dive into the economics. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's two things that are happening that really are exploiting these farmers. First of all, they're getting terrible prices on their coconuts. They're being cheated on the price. They never get the full price. And the buyers of the coconuts, they do this tricky thing where they'll come back and say, "Oh, 10% of your load, 20% of your load was no good." It either had too much moisture, or it had mold on it, or something like that. And but there's no way to verify, no transparency, and so they're cheating them on that side. But then, and this is where it really like irks me, is they offer these predatory loans when a kid gets sick, breaks a leg, or a typhoon comes. At these opportune times, the buyers themselves of the coconuts will say, "Hey, I'll lend you the money." Now these are small loans. We're talking about $150, $300. But with that combined with 200% interest rates, it crushes these families and they never can get out. And I was talking with one farmer and I was talking about their loan, and they were talking about how bad it was. And they were saying every day we lived in fear of losing the farm or losing the kids. And at the end, and I'm like weeping, like thinking of how hard that must be to live in that kind of fear. And at the end, I said, well, how much was this loan? It was $140. But they lived in that constant fear because that's a lot of money for them. That's a month and a half worth of living, and they couldn't get out from under it. So it's hard, and they're living in a terrible situation that it's easy to take advantage of. And so when they can't pay that off, the option is to sell the farm to pay off the debt, or they send a family member far away to go work. So a mom or maybe a daughter, the husband goes, and this is where the trafficking happens. Because at best, they're abused, the women are often raped, but at worst, they're trafficked. And they come home with this brokenness and darkness in their eyes that says there were secrets of things that happened that they're not going to talk about. And of course, it's underreported. You look at the trafficking statistics and you might say, Erik, it's not that bad. And that's because what wife is going to say? I actually wasn't just a maid in Saudi Arabia. I actually got trafficked and tricked and forced to have sex with other men. And you're coming back, the husband's not going to be able to understand that, doesn't have the worldview to realize and to forgive. And so she just says nothing.
That right there is heartbreaking. And then when you look at the economic side, but obviously, like you said, the minor amount of money and yet how much that can completely change the life of the family. Go ahead and dive into then carrying that forward for Dignity Made in terms of what you do and how you're able to then create these opportunities to truly help these farmers and these families.
Yeah. It would be easy for us to say, oh, well, let's just pay off these debts. Let's just help them escape these kinds of things. And that kind of nonprofit mentality was kind of our first thought. What if we did that? But if we wanted to really solve it for generations, we realized that we need to set up a new marketplace. And we need to connect them directly to the global marketplace. And that was going to be the best situation. And if we could set up the model right, that this could spread into other areas of the Philippines, and even this is happening in Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, other tropical places. Well, it's even happening with, a lot of people know about chocolate and it happening with the coffee industry, but it's happening with a lot of agriculture. These poor rural areas are often struggling, and that's often where people are most vulnerable because they don't understand what's happening. And so when somebody comes by and says, hey, I'll give your daughter a job as a waitress in Europe or as a maid in Saudi Arabia, and they hear the amount of money that the daughter could send home, they just jump at the chance. They think they've won the lottery. So we realized we need to come in and set up a new economic model. I often think of it like, a lot of time the old adage people talk about, if you give someone a fish, or if you give someone a fish, they'll eat for a day. But if you teach them to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. And in some of these hard places of the world, like our area of the Philippines, they know how to fish. Now we're teaching them some things, but really what they are lacking is access to the lake. The lake is controlled by powerful people, or maybe the metaphor is the lake is dried up for various reasons. They don't have access to the lake. And so we're creating a marketplace where they can have a new option instead of the options being I lose my land or I have to give my daughter to go work somewhere else. We're giving them a new choice to say, I can sell my coconuts to Dignity Coconuts, and I'm going to get a good price, and I'm going to be a part of this community transformation.
How much goes into that for education for you in terms of trying to say, hey, look, here's what we're trying to do to help you. But also, too, when someone comes along and says, hey, your daughter's going to make this amount of money, don't listen to them because they're lying. They're trying to manipulate you. So how much education has to go into really convince them of the power of this opportunity to show them the new lake, but also, too, to educate them around, hey, don't believe what people are also telling you.
Yeah, we do a lot of education, and we did some of this early on in the high school as well. But for a lot of these farmers, the hard part is they lack that perspective. They don't understand how some of these things work outside of their world because their world is stressful. They're working so hard to work the land that they have to pull their kids out of school. They don't have time. They're not browsing on social media and learning, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I didn't know that that's how things work. And so they're really they're in the dark on a lot of these bigger narratives and understanding of how the world works. That often you and I do understand. And so coming in and helping them understand how it works, helping them calculate the cost. We do a lot of training on what's the difference between a good loan and a bad loan. How do you calculate the interest when your buyer of coconuts says, hey, I'll give you this much money now, but each harvest, I'm going to take this many coconuts. How do you put that into an interest rate, into a math equation? And then so education is a big deal. I was teaching on why people needed to use water filters at home. And I had a gentleman say to me, Eric, and he holds up a glass of water. And he said, Eric, you're trying to tell me that this glass of water is actually dirty? He said, I can see right through it. I don't see any particles. This is the cleanest water I've ever seen. Eric, you're crazy. And so we had to, what are you going to do when most people have a sixth grade education? Are you going to pull up microscopes and teach them what a microscope is and what microbes are and bacteria and E. coli and all these kinds of stuff? And so, no, what we did is we ended up on the next session, we baked a cake. My friend Mel, he baked a cake and he said, we handed it out to everybody. And right before everybody dug in, Mel said, hey, before we pray and eat, I want to let you all know my wife was baking the cake with my baby, and she was holding her baby and she was mixing the batter, and the baby actually ended up pooping a little bit into the batter. And I'm really sorry, but it was only a little bit, and you can't see it because it's a brown cake, and you probably won't even taste it or smell it. It'll be fine. And then he blesses the meal and looks up, and of course nobody's eating it. And there's this awkward silence. And finally he said, why aren't you guys eating it? And so it became this great illustration of, yeah, you can't see E. coli in your water, but we know it, but we can show you actually 3M makes these strips where you can pour a little water on, and the next day it like has all these red dots all over it. That's helpful. But we also know 50% of the kids go to school with diarrhea. I mean, imagine trying to focus in school, while having diarrhea. That's got to be terrible. And so we're trying different ways of explaining and doing education that might not be like lecture style that you and I grew up with.
All of this to me is extremely important for an audience to understand the complexities of a situation. And like you said, you go in thinking one thing, and then you realize by asking questions like, wait a second, there's a lot more to this, and we need to come at it with an economic solution, which then leads you on this whole nother journey. So for Dignity Made, obviously there is a product. And so talk about what the consumers are able to purchase.
Yeah. So in the process of buying these coconuts, we had to figure out what are we going to make. We knew there was something valuable here. We knew the coconuts was a superfood, and so we started with the coconut oil because we'd heard lots of things about how it was great for your skin, your hair, cooking, and all the benefits. And as we were just about to buy the equipment to make coconut oil, our Don Biker one of our founders who is passed away now. He was a bit of an inventor, and he stopped us and he said, "Guys, I don't think this is the best way." He said, "Guys, we're boiling the oil. There's got to be the really good raw micronutrients in these coconuts before it's boiled and they go away. Can we figure out how to do that?" And so that led us down this new path. Nobody had done this at that time. And so we figured out how to use G-force to separate the milk from the oil using a centrifuge. We did a whole proprietary filter process, which, it spent us 2 years of research and development, which, if I was to redo it, I don't know if I would do it again. There's so many times we were about to die because we didn't have cash for it. But in the end, we have a uniquely better product that is very different to competitors. So this is if you're on video, watching this on video, we have a raw virgin coconut oil that it tastes better. We just won the Superior Taste Award, and it is better for you because it's raw. It doesn't lose those micronutrients. We're fair trade verified, and it just packs a bigger punch because it has all those benefits. So, and then the fun part is we have all of our employees sign the lids of the jars that are being made that day. So you can look up the QR code and find the person that was on your lid and hear their story of how their life is different. Over the years, we've made a few other products. A lot of people said, "Hey, coconut oil is a main ingredient in lip balm," and they said, "I'm putting it on my lips already, but can you make a lip balm?" So we decided to make a lip balm using our coconut oil and other natural ingredients. So this is vegan and it's organic. So we're getting rave reviews about that. And we have a few other products. We're launching a few this year as well. But those are our main ones. And so every time you buy one of these products, you're helping more farmers escape that what the locals call copra slavery. And yes, I mean, I've stacks of applications of other farmers that want to join Dignity and be a part of this and help get out of debt and get fair trade for their coconuts. And the way that we're going to be able to do that and accept their application is by getting new customers, new people trying our products, and then repeat buys.
You have a ton of testimonials on the website. What's been one of the creative uses of your product so far that you've seen, or one of the most creative?
I think finger paint was one of the most creative. A mom found, I guess there are like toxic chemicals in a lot of finger paints. She's like, "I don't want that." And so she took coconut oil and like food dye and made a finger paint. But the main uses is cooking, baking, sauteing, just anytime where you'd use butter or vegetable oil, which people are realizing a lot more how terrible those seed oils are for you. Even canola oil, people thought for a long time that was a much healthier oil, and the science is proving that it's not. And so, the real healthy fats to cook with is really, it's your olive oil, coconut oil, and grass-fed butter. Those are just proving to be the really good ones. And then, of course, it's really great for skin and hair. We get rave reviews from people talking about how it's helped their hair, helped their skin. We get people that have eczema and other things that have completely healed. I'm not claiming anything, FDA, but they have claimed that it has healed their eczema and psoriasis. It's quite amazing. And then, while we're talking about kind of the off beaten path ones, personal lubricant. I'm not quite sure how to market that one in a tasteful way, but I get a lot of people telling me how grateful they are for how great our coconut oil is.
So how has this changed you? So when you talk about where you started on this journey through the church, going and obviously, serving in other places, other countries, and going in and feeling the love and that side of it, but a very different service. And then now through Dignity Made, transforming lives of farmers and their families and creating products, obviously, that for consumers. How has this changed you as a person and your view of yourself to make a difference in the world?
I think I often look up to some of these celebrity CEOs and think, wow, like they've got it all together. And I think there's a lot of people who feel like that feel like, hey, I'm not that kind of CEO. And I've come to realize that I think some of the best leaders are ones that they care deeply and that they care about the culture, and that they work hard. It's amazing how love and hard work can go a long ways, and we have a long ways in our business as well. I wouldn't say we're a success story yet, but what we're doing is exciting, and I think it's been fun. I think I underestimated some of the impact we could have and how fun this would be. We've had of course, we wanted to make an impact on the farmers and on employees, and having, helping the community. What we didn't expect is there'd be all these other businesses that would pop up. We have, a guy who decided to buy some lumber because he saw that we were driving an hour and a half every time we needed to build something. Another guy, would have building supplies, or a bakery. A restaurant popped up across the street because our employees were going home for lunch, and he thought, oh wait, if I pop up a restaurant, I'm going to have a bunch of people coming over for lunch. So there's this. It really started stimulating the whole economy in a bigger way than we really realized. I feel like I didn't answer your question.
No, that does. And I want to carry that on the leadership side for the strategy there, because oftentimes you hear, and you alluded to it, if I knew then how much work it was going to be, I might not have made that decision, right? But at the same time, that's also part of where the magic is. And going through the process for the manufacturing and figuring out the better way to do it versus maybe what would have been the easier route, creates differentiation, creates a uniqueness. And so from a leadership standpoint, especially on the business side, what's something that you've learned going through this process?
I definitely am really glad that we developed this uniquely better product, because I think just having a better story, but having the same product as everybody else, I don't know if we would have made it this far. It is a good story, but I love innovation. I love making something better. I mean, these lip balms, they are unique and they are better than what's on the market. I think going back to like a leadership lesson, I think one of the biggest things is being a good listener. We really listen to the people and what do you need here? And that's where the whole business model came up. It's really easy, especially I'm an American, and we're kind of taught from a young age that we have the answers and just go do it. And we can often parachute into hard situations and people in poverty. And real quick, we come to conclusions of, oh, I know the answer. Here's what we should do. And we come up with a plan. And it's really important to listen. My wife, she works at a homeless shelter, and it's easy to they get a lot of people that come in and say, well, they just need a job to do that. And it's so interesting how it's complex. When you get deep down, there's a lot more to it. And so listening well to really what's the full picture, which is usually a little bit more complex than we'd like it to be on the outset. I think being proximate too. We put our factory right in the middle of the farms. Now, everybody told us, no, you should have the factory where there's good logistics and put it in the big city because you're going to have easy access to good talent for managers and things like that. And then just send the trucks to the farms. And we could have done that. And I think sometimes I dream of better logistics. But thankfully, the governor paved a road for us, which I couldn't believe. But being proximate to the people, we live there. We live with the people. We see what's happening, and we understand our farmers better than any other company understands. And so we're catching on. When we had a drought, I was with the farmers when they were saying to us, yeah, the monkeys it's so bad that the monkeys are coming in from deep in the mountains, and they're coming in to eat our coconuts. And so these are things that, we're living with our farmers. We're locked arms with them, saying we're in this with you, and they're informing us. And so we even have we have meetings where we talk about pricing openly, and we talk about how do we make sure this is fair for both of us. And so I'm really glad we did that. And that's created a lot of loyalty, where we've had other trucks come in from other companies wanting to buy our organic coconuts from our farmers. And we don't have an exclusive contract with our coconut farmers, so they could sell. And to have over 100 farmers tell us, hey, they were buying for a better price, but we decided to stick with you guys. Oh man. I mean, it makes me cry, that loyalty and that kind of serving each other mentality.
Some of the people that I hold closest to my heart, who are like family to me and literally family to me with my brother's side, are Filipino. And talk about maybe one or two things that really are special for you with the Filipino culture in the Philippines.
Filipinos are really warm. They're friendly. They're funny, constantly kind of telling jokes. They love to kind of poke fun at each other and give you a nickname or something like that. So they're really fun. They're also hospitable. And this one's a hard one for me because they'll invite me over to their house and serve a meal, and I'm counting up, and I'm thinking this is a month's worth of income right here that you just spent on me. And so that's hard because for them, it's a joy. I think that's a good lesson for a lot of, especially Americans. It's hard for us to have the joy of giving. I don't know why that is, but so they've taught me that. And they're also incredibly resourceful. For the Filipinos, this is generalization, they often look to the Japanese and say, wow, they're so precise, and they've created such high quality. They look at the Chinese and say, wow, they have these big manufacturing facilities, they can produce so much. And they look at themselves and say, us Filipinos, we kind of copy people, we do this, but we don't have a lot that we can call our own. They do have some industries, but that's kind of how they think. And yet, I watched a team of 8 men take this huge diesel engine and carry it from one building to the next using like pulleys and ropes. I mean, pretty primitive in some ways, but they figured it out. We didn't have a forklift at that time. And, kind of wish they had done more to get my attention to say, Eric, we really need one. But they didn't. And they just decided we're going to figure this out. And they got it. They moved it 100 feet, which is really remarkable. And so what they're able to do with very little is quite incredible. And that's part of how we actually came upon how we solved the problem of how we make our coconut oil. We bought a centrifuge from a well-known company, multi-billion-dollar company in Europe. And they came multiple times and they said, oh yeah, we know how to make oil out of this machine. And they couldn't. And it was our engineer, Erwin, with a 6th grade education that said, I'm just going to take the scientific method and just start trying different settings on this machine, different RPMs, different outputs. And until he finally one day said, I figured it out. And this coconut oil came out and we're like, that's it. And he did it. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that it's exciting to see how these poor, resourceful people are a part of it and have that kind of pride and dignity to say, hey, I'm not worthless. I'm not poor. I'm not nobody. I have value. I have something to offer, not just I'm a receiver of somebody else's charity. One last story on this note. So we have all of our workers sign the jars each day at the end of the day. And when I first did this with, it was a group of 12 ladies, I was explaining what we were doing. And my mindset was mainly on the customer because I wanted the customer to really feel what I felt when I looked in the eyes of these women and the transformation that we had seen. And so I was trying to say, hey, I want you to write your name here because somebody else is going to, on the other side of the world, they need to be able to read it. So it needs to be legible. We had, by the way, we had some people that they were just doing this, X's on the jar because they were illiterate. And I was like, oh, shoot, we're going to have to teach everybody how to read and write. But I get through my whole spiel and I explain it. I get them all writing with a Sharpie marker so it's legible. And I explain, hey, your story's going to be online and this and that. And at that point, I'm interrupted by a group of women they're covering their mouth and they're giggling. And I'm thinking, oh boy, is my fly down, what's going on? And finally they say to me, Erik, we're from the poorest province in all of the Philippines. We're seen as nobodies. Nobody ever looks to us for anything. And yet my name is on this jar and somebody on the other side of the world is going to taste the best tasting coconut oil out of this jar and it has my name on it. And you could just see this pride on their faces as it was so much that they just started giggling. They couldn't handle it. So it's fun to be able to give people not just a handout, not just charity, but we're giving people dignity. Well, I don't know if we give it, but we recover, we restore the dignity that's in there already.
It goes back to, though, like you said, though, the access, the opportunity. People want to have a chance to thrive, to have a life that, is successful and what that looks like for them personally. And you're giving them access. You're giving them an opportunity. You're setting them, you're setting the stage, the foundation for them to have this sort of opportunity for success and what that creates. And so one more question, then we'll switch over and do a lightning round and wrap up with just short questions, short answers. But how has the church played a role now in your life? So when you look at where you started with your family, and in some cases kind of wanting to not necessarily run away from it, but it's like it's in your face, to all of a sudden now with what you're doing, where does the church stand in your life and in this work now?
Yeah, growing up, church was, kind of like George Washington. Like, yeah, of course, believed he exists, believed he crossed the Delaware River, to do these things. But what impact does that have on my life other than I'm forced to go on Sunday and Wednesdays to this building? And now it's something that's really become vibrant and alive in my life. And it's become kind of a North Star for character, morals, and even teachings. I'm surprised at how much leadership there is in the Bible and church, and also it's created a good place for good connections. I found there's been a lot of people in the church that want to help and help us, and we've had a lot of people that charge a lot of money for their consulting services say, you know what, I'm going to give you a big discount, or some people that have said, I'm going to do this pro bono to really help me out, and that's been huge because we've needed it. It's been really challenging, and had not we had some people with big hearts come alongside us, we wouldn't have made it. And so, yeah, it's been instrumental. It's been essential for our journey, and it's been good for us. And I would say we've even had a couple times where we felt like we've had direction from God. I'll say, I don't talk about this a lot on podcasts, so you're kind of getting something out of me that's new. But Yeah, we've had a few times where we felt like, gosh, which way do we go? And we have this group that loves praying for us, and we kind of consulted them almost like an advisory board. It's like our second advisory board giving us advice on, well, here's what we feel like God's saying. So it has been a big part. I think talking about religion and spirituality is a little tricky because I think what I don't want people to hear is that, we're not trying to force religion on anybody. Yeah, we're definitely motivated by the life and teachings of Jesus, but nobody's having to forced to become anything. In our company, we have, we've had some times where we've had morning devotions, but it's voluntary, and so we're not forcing anything, and we also are not on the. There's a lot of Christians out there who have a lot of hate and a lot of things they're against and are very vocal about it and get very political about it. And we are not into that at all. So we just want to love people well. And we're inspired by some people in history who have loved well.
Well, when you do the kind of work you're doing, it's missional. And I think personally, and like you said, professionally in a larger context, especially with your team and work, that all goes different ways with different organizations. But when you talk about personal, faith drives so many people to do what you're talking about when you're going in and serving others, especially global as a ministry and things like that, as a personal piece of this. The church usually plays a very important role in their personal side, whether it's them and their family or what drives them to be able to want to create this sort of positive change and transformation in the lives of others. So I just think that's the fun of this podcast is like, it's a personal conversation around what drives you. What lessons have you learned? How are you making it a difference in the world? What would your inspiration be for others to go out there and do good, to power the good in the community? So that's why I love these conversations. But let's go ahead and switch it over and do a lightning round.
Mind if I share one more thing?
Yeah.
So my father-in-law, he's one of our founders, Stephen Fried. He has Parkinson's, and that's actually part of the reason that we switched. I became CEO about a year ago, and so he has this terminal illness, and so he's saying things lately about, hey, I'm getting towards the end of my life. I have a shelf life, and it's very clear it's coming soon. And he has said the interesting thing about dying is that you're all of a sudden more and more aware of the significance of your days, and yet you have less and less of them. And he said, I'm really grateful for my life that I've spent so much of my life investing in people, and that investment in people has paid off. I feel so proud of the life I lived and the people I served. And yet there's a lot of people, a lot of my friends and people around me that they're catching on now later in life. And if he were on this podcast, I think he would encourage you to say, hey, serve others. It's worth it. That investment in people and investment in those that are less fortunate is going to pay off, especially as you get older. You might see it even more clearly.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that right there is a clip that needs to be shared more and more because one, for all of us, life is short, and your legacy is what people say about you when you leave the room, right? It's how do you pour into others, and it's what difference have you made in the lives of others that will be carried forward. And so I just think all of this, when you talk about service, making a difference, powering the good, all of this, it's such an important conversation to have, whatever age you are, but definitely the earlier the better, to get people to realize it's not about you, it's about serving others and how that transforms your life in the process of serving and transforming the lives of others. So let's go ahead and switch over lightning round. So short questions, short answers, just a fun way to wrap up and get to know you better. What's something you like to do to relax?
I love playing ultimate frisbee. It's kind of a new sport for me. It's fun. I love just exercising, relaxing. That's so weird. I think I'm going to take the question as like, how do I detox from work? And it helps just getting some exercise, chasing a frisbee around.
What's a favorite show? What do you like to watch on TV?
I've really gotten into Severance. It's kind of a silly show, but I don't know. I kind of like some of the existential themes of it. This idea, could you really separate your work from your personal life? It even has some spiritual overtones to it. So, yeah, that one's a weird, fun one.
What's a favorite vacation spot for you?
Alexandria, Minnesota. I grew up, we had a small cabin near a lake, and I remember I have great fond memories of spending the summers there. My mom was a teacher, high school teacher, and so we would spend weeks at a time just up there near a lake and going to the beach every day, and wonderful, wonderful place.
What's a fun date night for you and your wife?
The funnest dates we've had lately is we signed up for an improv class. I've never wanted to get into acting or things like that. That's the furthest thing for me. But I for a Christmas present, I was going to get her an improv class, and I realized last minute, why would I have her have this great experience and not join her? So as afraid as I was of doing it myself, I jumped in, and it was the best. We ended up doing 101, 201, 301, and even 401. We just love it. It's fun. We're not really very good, but it's very fun.
So you can carry this from the improv, or it could be something unrelated, but what's a lesson you've learned from your wife, or what's something you've learned from your wife?
My wife, the biggest lesson is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And she's kind of this risky woman who loves adventure and just go for it, wears her heart on her sleeve. And I tend to be more cautious, calculated. And so she encourages me to kind of go for it.
So when someone comes to visit from out of town, where do you like to go and take them?
Minnehaha Falls, year round is fun. It's kind of this river with a waterfall down. It's in Minneapolis. It's a wonderful place. And then for dinner, Brunson's Pub. It's this local pub that has just fantastic food, and it's about 5 blocks from my house, so we bike there sometimes.
Nice. See, all this kind of touches on the tourism side too, so you get some shout outs. What you've already said a couple of them, but what's a favorite or a quote that inspires you? And you don't have to get it verbatim, but what's a quote that inspires you?
The one that's coming to mind is the Dawson Trotman, founder of Navigators, said, "If you can't see very far ahead, go ahead as far as you can see." And especially being in the kind of nonprofit work where you're not quite sure what the answer is, or our business, which sometimes the path is very foggy. That's been really helpful. And I think that's been a great leadership lesson.
Well, obviously, you are creating your legacy every single day. You've got many, many years to come, hopefully blessed. But what do you hope many years from now your legacy is, especially with Dignity Made?
I hope that 2,000 business leaders rethink how they use their power and influence in the world. That they would, and of course, I want to see thousands of farmers escape copra slavery and for their families to flourish. But really, bigger than that, I would love to see over 2,000 business leaders think, how could I take my business and use it for good? I have a friend, Andrew, in California. He's got a window business, and we're talking about what if you set up a window business in Pakistan and employed people that it was hard to give them jobs, economic development. What if you set up this and think about your business not just as, hey, I'm going to make money and maybe give some of it away, but what if you kind of put those two together and thought of this as, I'm going to actually do good through my business? I think it has an exponential impact than this kind of bifurcated, here's charity over here and here's business where I just try to make as much money as possible.
Yeah. And I think that to me is the beauty of this, is encouraging others to say it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be and together. And when you do that, that's the power of being able to use your business as a catalyst to be able to drive community engagement and to power the good. So carry that into for Dignity Made. Where do we go to learn more, to see the products? So how do we carry that forward?
Yeah, you can find us at dignitymade.com. You can find all of our products there. We have some of our products on Amazon, and then we're in some stores. Some of the big ones would be on the East Coast Stop and Shop, in Texas, Central Market, in Minnesota, Coburn's, and Woodman's in Wisconsin, and a lot of other small mom and pop. And if you have a small co-op or a little mom and pop natural health food store that you're part of, ask them for us. Oftentimes they can carry it, and that really helps their sales. Try us, and especially if this is around the holidays, I encourage you to give gifts. It makes a great gift for your neighbors, teachers, coworkers, things like that, and it really does make a big difference.
Well, Erik Olson, CEO of Dignity Made, thank you for being a change maker. Thank you for all you and your amazing team do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the ChangeMakers podcast. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.